Hello Internet, welcome back to our experimental Cataclysm series. If you're new here, this is the show where we talk about the changes that have come to the experimental version of Cataclysm over the last couple of weeks. And this week we have some interesting stuff to talk about. There is one spoiler, kind of, for a NPC faction mission. So if you want to avoid that, there are timestamps down in the description down below, as well as this video itself should have, when you hover over it, a bar telling you where that is. So just letting you know that there's some mild spoilers. First up this week, we're going to be talking about 0.f. 0.f does not have a name yet. I asked on Discord, so I probably will refer to it as 0. Foxtrot, because saying 0.e, 0.d, 0.f, that kind of stuff bothers me. But 0. Foxtrot is coming, and what this means is that they're preparing for another stable release. If you're not really familiar, maybe you haven't been through this before, Cataclysm has the experimental builds, which are built multiple times a day usually, and it's the most current version where they're testing new things, they need feedback a lot, etc. The stable are much more limited in the terms of features, however, they're a much more stable experience, so people who don't want bug issues, who don't want to deal with the newest feature causing problems, they will play on stable. 0.f means that they're preparing to release another stable, which means that the flow of new content for the experimental version is going to slow down. We're currently in feature freeze. I'm not 100% what exactly constitutes a feature. Sorry, my puppers are barking. So I'm not 100% what a feature is. It says here, going forward, only features on the release blockers project should be considered for merging. In my head and my limited understanding, a feature is something like a new mechanic or something special. Like we're going to talk about the surface requirements for butchery. That I gotta assume is considered a feature. Then we'll be moving into content freeze after a period of time. What that means is that there will be no new items, monsters, locations, things like that. And then they enter string freeze, which really has no impact on us at all, because it just means no more editing strings and things like that. So pretty minor, and this is mostly work for the dev team. This is not something that you or I is going to impact in any way. If you're creating new content for the game or you have new ideas for the game, that doesn't mean you should stop working on them. It just means that there's going to be a period of time in the near future where they freeze that stuff and it won't be added to the game until 0.f is fully resolved. This is ultimately a good thing. I actually saw, it really frustrates me. I'm gonna give you a little taste here for a second. It really frustrates me when the dev team makes a move like this. Stables are important, and it frustrates me when I see people, when they make a move like this and then I see people immediately responding negatively. I saw 0.f got released or announced for the release, and I immediately saw some, I'm not going to name check anybody, but I immediately saw someone who was like, yeah, well, there's a lot of bugs in the game. You'd think they'd be working on that, but I guess they're more interested in putting out a stable. And that's just ignorant, and it frustrates me when people have that attitude. Yes, feature freeze, content freeze, it's going to slow down new things coming to the game, but stables are important. It's important for the project. There are a lot of people who play stable who, if we don't release stable releases, then they get bored of the game because they've already seen a lot of the content. They're not getting new features, so there's really nothing to keep them invested in the game long term. A downturn in long-term players means there's fewer contributors, fewer people, talking about the game, spreading word of the game, things like that. So for me, from that perspective, I think is valuable for the project. Stables are when articles tend to be written about the game. Stables are when people who have stepped away from the game because they only play stable, they come back to the game for a period of time. So I think frequent stable releases and their timetable in general, they're trying to shoot for about every 6 months. I think that's really important, and it really bothers me when I see people immediately crapping all over something the dev team's doing. So maybe just show a little fraction of respect for the people who provide you this game for free and are constantly working at it. But anyway, I didn't mean to get on the soapbox. It just really bothers me. I saw 0.f and was like, oh, that's great. And then immediately met people who were like, this is terrible. What are they doing? Plus, if you hate bugs, the stable releases involve tons of bug fixes and work on that kind of aspect of the game. So I don't really understand it doesn't matter. Let's not focus on that. So 0.f has been announced, and we're not sure what it's going to be called, and we're not sure when it's going to be fully released. My guess, just as a full estimation based on what it has been kind of on 0.d and 0.e, I would say probably looking at the next maybe 3 months from now. I don't know what their actual timetable is. I have no inside knowledge about that. I just think that, I estimate it'll be a couple months probably. So, moving on. Didn't mean to get up on the old soapbox. Okay. So, small changes first, bigger changes down the line. Number 1 from Varen Krytor. Oh, I recognize that name from Discord. Hello, Krytor. It is a warning for players before they pulp acidic corpses. Pretty straightforward, pretty, basic, but I think is ultimately good. I still get questions from people who are like, I smashed an acid zombie and got splashed. Is that supposed to happen? It's like, yeah, it is, and I guess we probably should have warned you about that. So I like this change. I think it's pretty simple, but ultimately is a good little change. Wanted to shout it out. Next, we got some variants for our single-use storage junk drawers. Is it single-use? I forget what the S's stand for. But basically, if you've been raiding houses in the recent months of Cataclysm, you've probably seen that it's pretty much always the same stuff in the junk drawer. You get those long strings, you get some duct tape occasionally. There's just basic stuff, the light batteries, the same things you see over and over and over. And this just adds a few variants to that to spice things up a little bit. I like this a lot. I really enjoyed when SUS stuff was starting to be worked on. I thought it really added a lot of flavor to the game and fleshed out the world in a way that felt natural and correct. But then you started seeing the repetition over and over and over. So my solution in my head to that is more of this, more variants for those storage containers. So really like this. This is from Jeremy. So thanks to Jeremy, and shout out to Jeremy for doing some work. Next, we got 2 new professions. Specifically, they are the combat medic and the Speed King and Queen professions. I really like combat medic. I kind of have always felt that there should be more variants of the military starting classes, because the military is so varied in how many different types of people do many different types of job within the confines of the military. So anything that adds to that I really like. So having a combat medic makes perfect sense to me. The Speed King and Speed Queen is essentially, it is a motorcycle person, somebody who starts with motorcycle gear, a super bike, and 6 levels of driving, which 6 is pretty high, but I guess is just, and in fact they said somewhere, yeah, I mostly just wanted to have a profession that had all that stuff to start with. I think this is fine. I don't love it. I don't think I'm going to be playing as it, but we have tons of professions that I'm never going to play as, and this one obviously has some character and role play associated with it, so more power to you for that. But I really like the combat medic thing, and again, I would like to see more variants of army professions in the future, so I think that's pretty cool. That's Fallout 48, by the way. I keep forgetting to shout out names. Next, from Knight, we have the ability for the Autodoc to check your radiation level as well as administer... Is it called Radaway in the game? I can't imagine they called it that. But you know what I mean, to give you radiation purge medications. Really like this. If you've been watching this series for any length of time, you know that I believe the Autodoc should be expanded to include a lot of these sort of treatments. And I really like that this has been added to the game. Pretty straightforward. I mean, it's not like a huge thing, and for most people it's not going to be really even noticeable probably for a period of time, but I really like this, and I love that the Autodoc is becoming much more utilitarian now that we have the blood stuff, and we're moving more towards wound treatment and things like that. I really like the idea of the Autodoc expanding its value, so I really like this change, so shout out to Knight for doing that. Next, from Curse Twist, we have the mainlining of the urban development mod. So this is not just this particular PR. There have been many PRs. They've been adding lots of houses and things to the game. And basically, there's a mod called the urban development mod. It has lots of variable buildings in it. And Curse Twist has been working to add those things into the core game. And I really like that. I always like when mods get mainlined, because I think a lot of people release content into mods that could actually be added to the core game and be available to everyone who plays, as opposed to just those who are aware of the mod. So I really like this. And adding to that, the hospital has been a terrible location for quite a long time. I get people all the time who say, "Oh, I'm going to go raid a hospital," and my response is always, "Why would you do that?" Hospitals in the confines of the game, in an apocalypse, in an emergency situation, where's everybody going to go? They're going to go to the hospital. And every time you go to a hospital, there's a jillion zombies there. So the hospital is already kind of an unlikable, overlooked place, and then you add to that we've had the same exact layout for the hospital for as long as I've been playing, which is 2+ years at this point, and or 3+ maybe at this point. So I really liked when I saw this PR that we're getting a separate variant of the hospital, even if the hospital still sucks, even if there's still no real reason to go there. I like that it's getting a second layout when it's been the exact same for a long time. I said the same things when I think it was also Curse Twist did the second story of the mall and the second story of the school. It's an old location that was always the same, and having any amount of rejuvenation come to that location is really good. It's really beneficial for the game. So I really like this. And of course, because it's getting a facelift, it's most likely going to have considerably more loot than the previous location. It also is multiple stories, which also makes a lot of sense because I believe the old variant, man, it's been years since I've been there, but I'm pretty sure it's a single floor hospital, which is really incredibly unusual. Most hospitals are multiple floors with patient rooms higher up. Nobody stays in the ground floor of a hospital generally. So I really like this. And again, loot density is going to be increased. The monster density is probably going to be pretty overwhelming, but still less than what was there previously. Actually, that's probably not true because of the multiple Z levels. But any given floor is most likely going to have more loot and less zombie density than the single floor of the previous hospital. I don't know, you'll have to go check it out. This will, at the very least, I don't believe it's been currently added to the abandoned start yet. There was some discussion about that, so it's likely maybe going to be a variant for that starting scenario in the future, and this should spice up that starting scenario considerably and make that a little bit more enjoyable. So, really like this, and just shout outs to Curse Twist for mainlining another mod. They've been doing really since I've seen them on the scene and part of the dev team or whatever. As long as I've been paying attention to them, they've been doing a lot of location work and doing this kind of stuff. So I really like seeing this. Hopefully you do too. Shouldn't probably have rambled about it as long as I did, but it's cool. I like it. So let's move on. Next, from Candleberry, we have the Hub 01 side mission called Iron Safari. I was actually not going to show this PR because I didn't really want to spoiler it for myself and for other people. But if you have been paying attention the last couple of weeks, the Hub 01 missions have gotten some updates. Specifically, the third mission got a new enemy and some other things added to it. There's a side mission now that's available at Hub 01 that did not previously exist, and this PR has added a second side mission to that location. So mostly I just, I played some of the NPC faction stuff, and Hub 01 is by far the gold standard as far as I'm concerned for what factions missions should look like. I really like them. I think it's a really cool location, cool location, cool lore, that kind of stuff. And I like that it's being continually expanded because, again, I think it's the most engaging of all the faction camps. I liked Isherwood as well, but this is just cool to see this being worked on. I know Candleberry has some other stuff that I see, pop up occasionally, but has done a lot of work with the Hub 01 missions and things. So just wanted to shout that out. I don't know, internet, I never know if I should show this kind of stuff. I try to be vague in the description and timestamps because I know some people don't want spoilers. This is a show kind of about spoilers. I don't know, should I share those things? But if you want to look at this PR, of course, there'll be a link in the description down below to the GitHub, as well as, I guess timestamps don't matter in this situation. Next, from Esotericist, we have add Trader Keep and Trader Keep equipped flags. What this will do essentially is allow you to select items for an NPC so that, or rather, the creator of the NPC will be able to determine what stays in an NPC's inventory and what gets sold by that NPC. So in our faction guides that we've been doing, I've been noticing that, like, for instance, the Isherwood place, if we went there and we talked to one of the people to trade with them, their clothing, the gear they were actually wearing, was available for sale in their merchant inventory. And that's really nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. These flags will allow us to manipulate that so that we can specify that they should not sell certain things. And I made an issue previously about duffel bag inventory items being displayed for sale, which have outrageous prices. And this will be a way for us to limit an NPC so that they don't try to sell their duffel bag or storage item. And I just think it's like a really tiny like thing that is the players are never going to see. Players are never going to understand why this, this thing happening behind the scenes, but it will lead to a more sensible trading system and things like that. We're not going to have NPCs who are going to sell you their own guns so that you can kill them with it. It just helps to avoid those sort of situations. So I really liked this when I saw this because and partially because I had complained about similar behavior, but I thought this was cool and I wanted to shout it out. So yeah, again, probably doesn't impact most of you, but it is what it is. Okay, next from Xenomorph the Third, I guess, we have feral humans sometimes drop their weapons on death. So we had feral humans implemented recently. They will carry things such as pipes or crowbar. Is there a crowbar one, I think? And even despite that, they would not actually drop those items when they die. Let's see if I can find an example here somewhere. So for instance, some of them are wielding a fire axe. This will now offer at least a chance of them dropping the fire axe upon their death. That way, just one makes more sense, from like a realism standpoint. And also is probably just was an oversight when they were created. Or maybe it was a question of, is it unbalancing to give players a crowbar just because they killed a feral zombie? I don't know. Not feral zombies, excuse me. They're not zombies. I keep getting corrected about that because I'm an idiot and can't keep it straight in my head. But I'm sure there was a balance, like implication here that needed to be discussed. But I like this. To me, I hate when I deal with an enemy whose description says that they have something and then they don't have it upon their death. I've complained about it endlessly in my Let's Plays when I think it's the security guard zombie in the labs has specific reference in their description to their body armor, but when you kill them, they don't drop any body armor, and I find that it just super frustrating. So if I found a feral zombie, or feral human, excuse me, that was carrying a fire axe and hitting me with a fire axe and I killed it, I'd be mad that it didn't drop a fire axe upon its death. So I really like this. I think that that's something that more contributors should think about before they write descriptions and create enemies. I think it just makes more sense if those things actually give you the items upon their death. So really like this. Again, simple, small, but improving the quality of the game. So it's moving on from Lyle SY. Again, this is the individual who has been adding all the zombie animals, many of the zombie animals. I think Knight added the Zomble. But like a lot of the zombie animals, I believe this person maintains the Dino mod. So they obviously work a lot with creatures. Now we have mutant animal mutations. What? Yeah, basically, as far as I understand it, this just will make mutant creatures get larger over time and scarier over time. So it's like evolving for like mutants, right? And like we have zombie evolutions, it's kind of that way, and just over time they're going to get beefier. I didn't actually look at this in detail, I'm not going to lie to you. I think all it does is just make them beefier and scarier. Like, yeah, so now instead of being just a generic giant cockroach, this got renamed to large cockroach, and I think gets bigger over time. I could totally be wrong about that. But anyway, the takeaway, let's just pretend I know what I'm talking about. The takeaway for this is that there are mutant animals that have been worked on in some way and theoretically improved. I really should have read this before I did this. Okay, so thank you, Lyle SY. I definitely understand what you did here, so thank you. Next from Curse Twist. Man, I'm such a bad... You would think I'd be better at this job. That we've been doing this series for like a year now. Still don't know what I'm doing. All right. Next from Curse Twist. Very exciting. This is actually really, really cool. This adds a freshwater research station and associated terrain and furniture. This is, as far as I'm aware, this is the first underwater content that has been added to the game, and I love that. So a while back we got like some work with Z levels. Boats were mainlined. We got some improvements to our waterways. I want to say that was it Gorgon did all the water reworks with the rivers now being much more much more natural and dynamic and interesting. But we've had all this water-based like content that's come to the game, but you still can't really go underwater. There's nothing down there. You still really don't have anything that spawns in lakes or locations. We have some islands, but that's pretty limited. And now we actually have an offshore underwater research center. And it does start above the ground. You'll see kind of the way the tile sets work. You know, you can see the land here. But this is essentially a platform that exists out in the water, and you can travel under the water and go down into the research station. I just thought this was really cool. My first thought, it reminded me of, there's a level in the original Deus Ex where you go to an underwater lab, and I just really like it conceptually, and also because it literally is, as far as I know, the first underwater content we really have. So it looks pretty basic. It doesn't look like there are really any enemies that spawn here, and I imagine the items are probably of a scientific nature, and probably some books laying around and things like that. Yeah, some books. And even though it doesn't look like much, I just think it's super, super cool. You know, one of the reasons, every time people ask all the time, like, hey, do we have diving? Do we have submarines? Do we have that kind of stuff? And the answer is always no. But it's not because people don't want it. It's not because the dev team doesn't want to work on it. It's just that there's no underwater content. So what is the point of making a submarine if there's nowhere to go and nothing to do with it? And then on the other hand, there are people who say, well, what's the point of making underwater content if there's no submarines or underwater like ability to dive? And so it's kind of this cyclical issue where we get stuck of no one's making content for it, and therefore no one is making the actual mechanics that allow us to go down there. So this is, to me, you know, this might amount to nothing, and it might be the only PR that ever comes of it, but I love it. I think that this is really great, and it's a step towards breaking that cycle and getting people to generate that sort of content. Plus, it's cool. Who doesn't want to go? I mean, you can live underwater at this point in an underwater base. That's pretty dope. I find it hard not to love this. I was super excited when I saw this. I thought this is probably my favorite change that we're talking about this week. I love it. So thank you again, Curse Twist, always working with the locations. Next, from Korg, in fact, this is the final change, and it's going to piss you all off. We got update butchery to use requirements. You've probably noticed this if you've been playing in the last couple of weeks. Essentially now, instead of being able to butcher pretty much wherever you want, which is what we've been able to do historically, is just drop a corpse on the ground and cut it open right in front of us, you now have a surface requirement for butchery. What this means is that you need a tool with the surface quality. You can see that here. Most of the butchery things that I've seen, dissecting specifically, I'm aware for sure, requires a surface level of 3 or more. I believe quick butchery is 2 or more. But this has been problematic for a lot of people, and I'll be honest, when this happened, I was pretty irritated by it because I didn't understand it. Basically, the surface quality is directly related to the size of the surface. So for instance, I was trying to dissect a scientist. I was in a lab, and I tried to dissect on the ground, and it says, oh, you can't, you need a surface of 3 or more. So I was like, okay, you know, kind of makes sense. You might need space and clean areas or something, I don't know. So let's drag this guy to a table. So I dragged him to a table, and the table only had a surface quality of 2. So I couldn't even butcher the guy on a table. And I was really angry about this. I didn't understand it, and I was pretty frustrated that I couldn't do things the way we've been doing things for literally for years. And I went around, I complained a little bit. I saw other people talking about it. And I realized that this surface was based on size. So even though it's a table, which is a proper surface that you would normally use if you were trying to cut something up, it's not large enough to really accommodate the actual dissection of a human being. And I don't know how to feel about this. I think that for butchery it makes sense. You need a tarp or a fiber mat or something you can lay down so that you can keep, like, it's a clean surface. It's not doing it in the dirt. It's not doing it on the asphalt with all that filth that comes from vehicles and things. So you need like a proper clean surface to use to butcher meat, and you need space enough that you can separate the good meat from like the organ meat from like the refuse and the filth and all the stuff that you don't want. And you need that space, and it needs to be clean. So for me, quick butchery and full butchery, it makes perfect sense that you need a good surface. What I don't like is that if I'm trying to dissect something for CBMs, I don't care about the cleanliness of the meat. I don't care about the cleanliness of the CBM. I don't need to worry about separating meat and things. All I need is to root around inside of a body for a CBM and then cut it out. And it makes sense that I need a large area to do that, but it doesn't make sense that I need a clean surface to do that. So the ground in a lab is a concrete floor that is presumably a largish area of multiple tiles. That's plenty of space for me to lay down a human-sized corpse, root around for electronics, throw whatever refuse I don't want kind of out of the way, and just dissect and pull out the CBM. So I think for butchery it makes sense. I think for dissection it does not, and I don't like that. I wish it was a little bit tweaked. I think that I could get behind this if it was butchery only, but for dissection it really bothers me. And I know that a lot of people, this is a very visible change. Lots of people butcher things, so it's been an immediate reaction from the community. A lot of folks seem real irritated by this, and I don't really blame them. I find it tedious. At my stage in my Let's Play, it was really easy for me to go upstairs and make a tarp, and it was no big deal. But I just find it annoying that I had to do that. I was irritated that I couldn't just put them on a table. I mentioned on Discord that having multiple tables in close proximity should contribute and make this surface area larger for the purposes of the check, but that doesn't exist in the game at the moment. And it really just, it bothers me. And I can see a lot of players in the early game who don't have the ability to make a fiber mat or a leather tarp or something like that. I can definitely see why people would be really irritated with this. Now on the plus side, using quick butchery, if I remember right, only requires a surface quality of 2, which is attainable by just grabbing a table from a nearby house, or something of that nature. A workbench is also a surface level of 3, I believe. Unfortunately, workbenches in the game, as of the time of this recording for this video, they're only metal, so you can't actually make like a wooden workbench. So in order to make a workbench, you actually have to have like a welding ability. So making that is a bit beyond the starter player. So I don't know how this shakes out yet. I haven't had a full game yet where I started with this issue. I get why people are frustrated. My advice to those people would be to just try to learn to use it. Try to learn that, okay, this is just a part of life now. Not only do I need a cutting tool or a dissecting tool, I also need to carry around a tarp when I'm going to butcher something. I think once you get that in your brain, it's going to bother you a lot less. It's going to become second nature. But at the moment, it's a change, and people are reacting poorly to it. So I would just say hang in there. I saw Korg, made a PR relating to this. I think yesterday got merged or today got merged. So it is changing in some capacity, or at least it's opening up that in the future we can be a little bit more granular about what requires what level of surface. And I get the frustration, but I also think it's okay, and it just requires some mental retraining on what you need to do. So, but we probably rambled about this long enough. So if you're frustrated by it, I get it. I hear you. I see a lot of people who are. I don't know, just it's part of life at this point. So, yeah, just gotta deal with it. That was by Korg, by the way. So yeah, and I don't think he's made a dev vlog in a week or so. I think he's due in a week or two to do another one of those. I don't know what his schedule is. But anyway, I think that's a wrap. So yeah, main takeaways this week is that 0 Point F is coming. Let's touch on that a bit as well. So this show follows updates to the game. Once we get to 0 Point F and they start, or rather once we get to content freeze prior to 0 Point F, there's not going to be anything for us to talk about. So this show, once again, is going to shut down. We did this back in like February or whenever they were doing 0 Point Allison. And, you know, it's not great for the channel. This is a lot of my views, right, come from this series. But ultimately, I don't mind, you know, these episodes. I don't like doing research. So I have a really hard time reading the coding language and stuff sometimes. So for me, it's just a break. I know for you, a lot of you really like this series. But yeah, it'll slow down, and then we probably will do an episode like we did for 0 Point E, where I talk about how to transition from one stable to the next. So people who play on stable can have an idea of what they're getting into when they come to the next stable. So going from 0 Point Allison to 0 Point Foxtrot will be a little bit easier of a transition, hopefully. But for now, I think that is a wrap. So thanks everybody for watching. Remember to come check me out live on Twitch sometime. I've been streaming, you know, 4 days a week, most weeks. So or trying to anyway. So come check it out, say hello, and hopefully you're all having a good week. Remember to wash your hands, keep wearing those masks, and stay safe out there. So I will see you all in a couple of weeks.